welcome to Shadow at Night. This is Thursday, February the 6th, 2025, and the show, as always, is brought to you by CanadaNanoSilver.com.
It's amazing. It has several natural health benefits, and it's been used for hundreds of years for health and healing. That's the main reason they made silverware from silver. But seriously, this nano silver from SilverCeuticals is the best and safest silver you can find. There are hundreds of studies and reports on it. I've read some of the studies myself, and it's mind-blowing. One of the things that sets SilverCeuticals apart is that it washes out of your body in 24 hours. No silver buildup and no turning blue. And it won't even harm the good bacteria your body needs. It's so effective they can use very small concentrations of silver, like 10 and 32 parts per million, and still outperform other silvers that have up to 3,000 parts per million. It's safer and more effective at the same time. It is an incredibly small particle that is small enough to work through your body, but big enough not to fall out of suspension. They infuse it into almost all of their products. It works in facial serums, toothpaste, gels, and even gummies that work to help your immune system.
Didn't catch me by surprise tonight. CanadaNanoSilver.com, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Call today for more information, 204-808-9292. And by the way, they're going to be at the Winnipeg Wellness Expo at the Winnipeg Convention Center. Not this coming weekend, but the following weekend, Saturday, February 15th from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. and then the Sunday from 10 till 5 o'clock. And if you're looking for free tickets, complimentary tickets to this event, you can get a hold of Kevin and Anna through the contact tab on the website, and find the retail locations as well on the website. Again, that is CanadaNanoSilver.com, CanadaNanoSilver.com. Before we bring our guest on tonight, Chris Scott from the Whistlestop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta, and a member of the Alberta Prosperity Project, we're going to talk a lot about Alberta tonight and what could happen by the end of the year, by the end of the month, maybe in the next few years, who knows? But things are definitely changing one way or another. And it looks like Alberta could possibly, maybe this time, decide to go on its own. Or maybe bring Saskatchewan, part of BC, and part of Manitoba with. Who knows? The different configurations, as I've talked to you guys about in the past, I don't think the lines are going to be staying the same on the Canadian map or any map in the Western world for that matter. Some quick hellos tonight before we begin. Kim is watching in Oka River. Irma is watching in Foam Lake, Saskatchewan. Hello, Yvette watching in Windsor. Robert is watching in Kelowna. Greg is watching from somewhere. Bev in Fort Mac. Darren's watching tonight. Brrr. He says it's cold, so he must be on the prairie somewhere. Hello, Michelle. Hello, Art watching on YouTube. Whatever platform you're watching on, whatever place you happen to be watching from, please don't forget to like and share. Get this out to as many people as you possibly can. This information is very important. People need to hear this stuff. And remember, every single day, there's new people waking up. Hello on Rumble to Notable, C. Baudouin 60, Spinnaker, Sadie 1000, Tammy O Kid, Swirly Bird, Webba Jammin', no, that's Weeby Jammin', Joyce Molson, Mouth of the South, Chicken Hair, Porter Boy, all you guys on Rumble, I love you. Thank you for being here. Before we bring Chris on tonight, I want to play this video for you. It's a clip from a video that Jordan Peterson dropped last night. It's about 25 minutes, the entire thing. You can see it on YouTube and Rumble and all the usual platforms. But in this clip, he talks about Alberta and what the power that Alberta has that many Albertans don't even realize, and how they can get out of this ridiculous situation they find themselves in Canada. This is an op-ed that appeared today or yesterday, possibly, in the National Post. Here it is.
The most American of all Canadian provinces, by widespread reputation and self-regard, Alberta is also the polity that Eastern Canada, particularly Quebec, relies on to survive while it pursues its disdainful socialist green agenda. This is the Quebec that is whined and manipulated so effectively for so many decades that its minority bilingual citizenry utterly dominates not only the perennially ruling Liberal Party, but the federal bureaucracy. That constitutes only two such unjust and unproductive advantages among many, by the way, and all that despite the Francophonie's strong and lasting separatist leanings. This is the same Eastern Canada and Quebec that regards itself as entitled not only to the so-called transfer payments characterizing the Canadian social contract, much to the disadvantage of the resource-rich West, but that simultaneously assumes and trumpets a moral superiority to the people who earn that transferred money in a manner deeply reminiscent of that more generally assumed by Canadians with respect to Americans. The consequence? No business case for the trade deals or infrastructure projects necessary to supply a self-admittedly desperate Europe and Japan with cheap and reliable Alberta energy. No new, plentiful, and gratefully received pipelines running west to east in Canada. Abject economic dependence, in consequence, for Albertans and Canada itself, as we're now finding out, on the purchasing decisions of the mad MAGA Yanks to the south. And now, that same Alberta is being called upon to sacrifice its artificially and morally limited economy to fight off the looming tariffs of Donald J. Trump, the imposition of which should come as no surprise to anyone the least bit awake. We walked right into this, folks, and boy, we deserved it, but we felt good about ourselves all the way. And what is likely to result? Trump has offered Canada status as the 51st state. If we had a well-constituted country, this would have never happened, or the suggestion would have been laughable. I see damn few people laughing, however, and more's the pity. A strong case can be made that such subordinate status would not at all be a good deal for the Great White North as a whole. For Alberta, however, and perhaps for the West as such, the situation is not so clear. Here's what I might do, given that, if I were in Premier Daniel Smith's shoes, or at least what I might threaten to do, taking a page from Trump's Art of the Deal book, because it's high time for the Albertans to play hardball. I might travel, say, to Mar-a-Lago, where I did, in fact, recently encounter that premier. I might have, well, there, a forthright, even blunt chat with Donald J., where I might say to him something like the following. Mr. President, my fellow Canadians have for decades compelled us to climb into bed with an 800-pound gorilla. That would be you, Mr. Trump. Now you've decided to consummate the deal, so to speak, and we've given you the upper hand on a silver platter, to mix metaphors terribly. While you're doing so, Canada is unlikely to become the 51st state, however. Not even Alberta. As you may well know, sir. After all, you'd have to offer us something better than what has been put forward by our fellow Canadians. That would be the continued privilege and expense of subsidizing Quebec, half of whose citizens consistently clamor to secede from the country, while we impoverish ourselves for their benefit. The constant imposition of serious practical impediments from the federal and other provincial governments, hint, hint, British Columbia, to the international business deals and pipelines that would help Alberta bring its resources to market. Continual insult on top of such injury in the form of unbearable and naive moralizing about their superiority in conviction with regard to the sustainability of the planet. And to top it all off, the accusation that I, Daniel Smith, am not patriotic enough to start a trade war with my strange bedfellow in the name of a country whose very leaders proclaim both identitylessness and a multiculturalism that none of my citizens want. And Trump might well say, or perhaps is even saying right now, I think I could top that offer, Ms. Premier. Fine as it is. I could offer Albertans the American dollar, full access to our markets for their resources at full international price, lower costs on almost all manufactured goods and on food, lower taxes, both corporate and personal, membership in a country that prides itself on being a country and that does not plan to dissolve itself into an unstable multicultural mishmash, genuine admiration for your economic and industrial endeavors, along with a can-do, visionary, and deeply entrepreneurial culture. Immediate, reliable, and guaranteed access to ports and pipelines, and full military defense. And if that's not enough, dear lady, no transfer payments, and the additional psychological advantage for Albertans in foregoing the perpetual and bullying Eastern Canadian attitude of grievance and moral superiority.
The subject of pipelines has come up again in the last couple of days because of these Trump tariffs that almost hit us this past Tuesday. We want to make ourselves less reliant on trade with the United States, where we do 80% of it. We want to be able to get more of our energy to market to other countries. So we have to get it to the ports. But Quebec has been fiercely opposed to any kind of pipeline running through their territory for years now. Just today, here is the leader of the Bloc Québécois, Yves-François Blanchet, speaking in French to reporters in Montreal.
Fiercely opposed to any type of transport on Quebec territory.
This is obviously a translator.
Hydrocarbons from Western Canada to any market whatsoever. It does not serve Quebec. It does not serve the environment. It does not serve the planet.
See, it's a mirage that we are always being told.
The LNG zombie that was never really alive, that we reanimate as a kind of slogan. The pro-hydrocarbon speech that even Mr. Harney is starting to hold as if there were a future in Western Canadian hydrocarbons. The sacrifice of interests in green energies that make Quebec rich and that are a contribution to environmental issues, which are suddenly being pushed aside from the public debate to say, we are in crisis. What a great opportunity to bypass Quebec considerations and ecological considerations to unroll a pipe to the Atlantic.
Yves-François Blanchet, the leader of the Bloc Québécois. Here's Chris Scott from the Whistlestop Cafe in Mirror, Alberta. Chris, is your blood boiling after hearing that?
Meh, I'm kind of used to it.
Welcome to the show, my friend. I was just checking earlier. It's been just over a year since you were last on. What's new?
Well, I'm trying to find out by reading The Economist, The World Ahead 2025. And as you probably know, it's a very, very left-leaning publication, like really left-leaning. As a matter of fact, in the section United States, there's a picture of Donald Trump, and the first caption is, "The sequel is usually worse." Now, I don't know what you've been seeing in the last, how long has Trump been president again? Like 6 months or something? No,
couple
2
of
weeks.
Couple of weeks, yeah.
The future looks pretty bright, honestly. I think this year is going to be absolutely fantastic.
So this 51st state thing that he's been holding up for the last few weeks, few months even now, and talking about Wayne Gretzky being the prime minister and Governor Trudeau and all of that stuff. What's your take on all of that?
Well, I'll answer with a prop. So I bought some wine yesterday, and when I went to the wine store, I bypassed every country's wine except for the USA. And I did that because I tend to go against the grain, and we have this ridiculous, shiny new thing right now, which is, buy Canadian, buy Canadian. But as an Albertan, every time I see that slogan, it actually makes me laugh out loud, And now we have the president of the most powerful country in the world, the biggest economy, our best friend and neighbor, offering statehood to our entire country. And I got to say, when I first heard him utter those words, I was rolling with laughter. Like, I thought it was the best possible way to troll Justin Trudeau that anybody could ever do. And Trump pulled it off just beautifully. But then when you get past the utter ridiculousness of it, you start to realize it's not that ridiculous. It really isn't. We share the same values, the same culture for the most part. I mean, Canadians hate themselves more than Americans do, that's for sure. Yeah. We're being taught to diminish and demean ourselves in the last 20 years or so. But I haven't heard a solid argument as to why we should not want to be part of the United States.
Well, Chris, we're Canadians.
Sure.
That's really the only argument I've heard. I've heard a lot of booing at hockey games in the past few days, notably Ottawa,
fools.
Edmonton,
They're all
the big
fools.
Vancouver. They're definitely fools. They don't seem to understand. They're falling for Trudeau's magic here that it's Team Canada and we're going to stand up. I mean, could you even believe that some Canadians had been falling for that crap? I mean, you've got Mark Carney saying, we will never roll over. And Trudeau saying the same thing. And Doug Ford saying, matter of fact, all of the premiers on this so-called Team Canada were kind of saying it. To a lesser extent, I would say Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, and definitely not Danielle Smith in Alberta, who's been vilified by Team Trudeau and the rest of them for standing up for energy and standing up for Alberta. What's the mood in Alberta about all of this that you can discern?
Well, in my circles, we're giddy. We're totally looking forward to whatever the future holds for this province, because finally it feels like something is going to happen, and something has to happen. You know, you mentioned earlier, you said, but we're Canadian. And I would reply with, what does that mean? What does it mean that we're Canadian? Does it mean that we have rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Charter and the Constitution, and we're protected from government by separation of different government's powers? Well, no. I can tell you firsthand that's not the case. You know, I ended up in the middle of that triangle, and it cost $350,000 to get out. So what does it mean to be Canadian? Canadian is a set of values, and Trudeau says we don't have any values. We don't have an identity. We're going to be the first post-nation state. And actually, now that I said the words, that's interesting that he said state, but probably wasn't thinking about an actual state. So,
not when he first said it back in 2015 or 2016 or whenever it was. That's right.
And that really made you think, like, do we not have an identity? What is the identity of Canadians? What is it about being Canadian that I love? I got a little Canada Kicks Ass stickman tattooed on my shoulder because I love being Canadian. But I think I love I love the idea of Canada, what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be the freest, most prosperous place on the planet. And we are not. We are not anymore. We've fallen in almost every metric to do with prosperity, quality of life, income, all of those things. We plummeted under the Trudeau government. This isn't anything new. Like what we're seeing from the federal government and the Premier of Quebec and what's his pickle that you just had on there talking about Alberta, this has been going on since 1905. Nothing has changed. And I think now we're at a position where in Alberta, you know, in the early 80s, we had Elmer Knutson out here and Christie. They wanted a Western Federation. Christie wanted an independent Alberta. Knutson wanted the West Fed, a confederation of the Western provinces. That didn't work out. And then the next major thing was, you know, when Brian Mulroney canceled the NEP, and it was the golden era again. Everything was getting better, and it still didn't benefit Alberta the way it should have. And then we had Preston Manning with this revival of, you know, Canadian Christian values, brought mainstream and almost made government with the slogan "The West wants in." That didn't work. And then we have Cory Morgan in the early 90s with his, you know, the Alberta Independence Party back then, which gained a lot of traction because of what was going on in the country and kind of fizzled out. So we've been through these things so many times. We've failed at different things. And I think now with what the Alberta Prosperity Project is doing, with Trump pulling and Justin Trudeau pushing and Quebec pushing, we have a chance. We have a chance to be free and prosperous in this province for sure.
So what would be involved in that? I know you've got a roadmap on the website of the AlbertaProsperityProject.com. What does this look like? Does it look like a redrawing of boundaries? Is it a municipal thing? Do you go from municipality to municipality, talking to people and telling them, look, or asking them, what are we getting out of Canada? Like, and what kind of feedback do you get? Do you need a big, huge marketing campaign in the big cities? Exactly how does this roll out? I mean, I know that you guys have got interest and have had interest, but might be time now to try to start capitalizing on that and even get yourselves a vote. Yeah.
So what it looks like, I should first point out that this isn't something new at all. Like this has happened many times over the course of history.
Dude,
I
you know,
like to
my
use-
dad used to wear a baseball hat with the Republic of Western Canada on the top of
Yeah.
it back in the 70s and 80s. I remember.
Yeah.
Believe me.
Well, the sentiment 1911 was the Great Canadian Milch Cow. Do you remember that cartoon where the East is milking the cow and Alberta is
Yeah.
feeding it? That was in 1911. It's pretty much the same. But what I'm referring to is other places in the world that have declared independence and decided, hey, we're culturally distinct. Our values are different. We want to do our own thing. Let's be friends, but we're not going to be governed by you. Kosovo is a great example because when Kosovo actually unilaterally declared independence, but it was a emotional revivalist thing that happened across society because of the way they felt about their situation. And there was only one country that stood up right away and acknowledged Kosovo as an independent nation, and that was Canada. So even Canada and Canadians respect the idea that maybe sometimes the relationship isn't good and someone needs to get out. We have the Czechoslovakia as the Czech Republic and Slovakia. We have some European countries that were at one point under the same flag, and they just peacefully decided, hey, we're not going to do that. And it's not a complicated thing. In our case, our Constitution, like the Supreme Law of Canada, outlines it. It outlines how a province could secede from confederation. It's not an easy process. You mentioned marketing. It's a massive education campaign. And I say education campaign because with the Alberta Prosperity Project, it's always been about freedom and prosperity through independence. We would have town halls, meetings, like sometimes there was thousands of people packed in a building where we would be speaking about Alberta independence. In the beginning, I would ask people, raise your hand if you believe in an independent sovereign Alberta. And sometimes, half the room put up their hands, sometimes 60%, whatever. At the end, when we finished delivering our speeches, I'd ask the same question, and it's like 100% conversion rate. So once people are educated as to the truth around Alberta independence, the reality of how we can accomplish it, and what it looks like after, it's a complete no-brainer. It's even less of a no-brainer than it is if you ask people, under the current terms that Alberta's in, would you join if that's what you were offered? And the answer is for sure no, right? So yeah, education campaign.
How much money has Alberta given to the government so they can give it to Quebec in the last 10 years? I'm not sure if you'd have a number like that in your head, but it must be a bit. Because Quebec got what this past year in equalization payments, like $13-14 billion?
Yeah, so Alberta has contributed roughly $700 billion since equalization, for which we've never got anything back. Now, I do want to point something out, though. In the 1960s, Alberta was really struggling. We went through some tough times. Not many people know this. Quebec actually had a special tax to help Alberta. So Quebecers, our Francophone brothers and sisters over there, who their politicians are idiots and they're speaking out against us, they love us. And they paid a tax specifically to help the people of Alberta. So they have stood up for us before, but not to the tune of $700 billion.
So if Alberta were to stay in Canada, you would have to get some pipelines built. You would have to, go through BC. You would have to go all across Canada, get a pipeline through Ontario and Quebec and whatnot. But how do you do that? I mean, I was talking on the show last night about the fact that pipelines are a federal responsibility according to the Constitution. And even with that, in the last few years, the legal opinion has somehow changed, where it's more of a provincial federal partnership, even though nobody has ever really come out and said that. No judge has ever said that. It just seems to be that that's the way the legal consensus has gone. So could you send a contingent to Quebec and say, hey, look, you guys, you've already got pipelines in the ground. It's not so bad.
Facts don't matter, unfortunately, to the crowd that we're speaking to when it comes to environmental concerns over pipelines. The facts are, the truth stands completely separate from what the narrative is around these things. We're fighting a feeling that oil is bad, all oil is bad, and we need to stop it. When in fact, the exact opposite is true. Oil and gas have been the single largest contributor to prosperity, quality of life, length of life, amount of free time, innovation, everything all across human history. The metrics just skyrocket when we start using that stuff. And yes, there are some downsides. We've had some steep learning curves with it, but we've been getting better and better and better using our oil and gas all the time. So to get it done, right now, within the structure we're in within Canada, the federal government has engaged in some serious tomfoolery in order to claim that they are responsible for pipelines because they're responsible for environment, right? Now, some people hear the word pipeline and they're like, oh my goodness, you're going to build this pipeline and you're going to spray oil all over the place. Well, no, that stuff's expensive. We want to keep it in the pipeline and sell it. That's not what's going to happen. And the provinces have sovereign jurisdiction over extraction and sale of their resources. Pipelines are really the only logical way to do that for oil and gas. But the federal government has stepped in and said, well, we're about the environment, so now we get to be partners with you on this, right? So we are policy locked. We're policy locked in this province and Saskatchewan and, Alberta and Saskatchewan pretty much. If we were independent, an independent sovereign nation of Alberta, all of the sudden, we have a few things going for us. We have the ability to negotiate our own trade deals, and we have some very, very good negotiators. One of them is Danielle Smith. She's like, none of the other premiers, even our prime minister, come close to the way that woman negotiates. She's amazing. And I'm not a real big fan of the UN, but even under UN international law, no country, a landlocked country has a legal right to get their product to Tidewater. So we would be in a much better negotiating position to get those things done right as an independent nation.
Or maybe, I mean, they're working on this port up in northern Manitoba. I think the federal and provincial government here just dumped another $50 million into it to make that port of Churchill a 12-month-a-year going concern, which could export oil and gas, natural gas, whatever, to all points on the planet in January as well as July. And it's supposed to be up and running in the next couple of years, which would be interesting. So when we talk about
interesting.
When we talk about Alberta independence, are we talking about just Alberta the way you see it now, or are you moving into Saskatchewan, Manitoba, BC interior? Because I don't see the lines on the map staying the same way, Chris. Not in the next year or 2 years. Something is going to change, as you point out earlier.
In a perfect world, you would have nations of people that shared the same ethics and values. And if you look at the entirety of North America, I hope CSIS isn't listening. If you draw a diagonal line right across North America, I mean, it's pretty much northern BC, Alaska, Alberta, Saskatchewan, the Midwest United States, down into central Mexico. Those are the people that, well, it's true. And that's where the diagonal thing came from. It's like, these are the people that share all the hardworking values, and we want to prosper, and we love energy, and we have faith in these types of things. The people on the outside near the ocean, they got water on the brain or something, and they're all nuts. So why don't we just have this? The problem is there is no mechanism by which a number of provinces can just say, hey, we're going to become a country. That doesn't work. The way our confederation works is that each province has sovereign decision-making for those types of things. So it would have to be that one province stood up and said, hey, we're not going to do this anymore, negotiate a better deal, or we're out. And then I have a feeling that would give confidence to other provinces to do the same. And then afterwards, you could have talks about whether or not you wanted to have some sort of a union or federation or confederation or something like that.
You mentioned Danielle Smith earlier as being a great negotiator. I would tend to agree. I think she's probably responsible for the tariffs being delayed, and I think she was probably responsible for the lower tariff on oil and gas energy than the rest of the products that were going to be tariffed, 25%. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to speak with her or any of the people from the Alberta Prosperity Project about this, but she did mention in a left-wing corporate media interview, I think it was on CTV with, what's her name, Vashi, whatever, that she said,
Yeah.
I can't remember her last name. She said that if this continues the way it's going right now, and she was specifically talking about Team Trudeau, Team Canada, and all of these people who fell for that nonsense and were booing the U.S. national anthem at hockey games. She said that we could be facing a national unity crisis, and this time it had nothing to do with Quebec. Is that true? Do you think that she was just rattling a saber there, or is the mood in Alberta starting to shift that way finally? Because I know it's been a stop and start thing ever since, Alberta first started talking about the idea of separation. But is it finally gaining momentum, or is it just a pipe dream?
It is gaining momentum, and it's because we are bracing for a national unity crisis. As a matter of fact, we're already in a national unity crisis. People just don't know it yet. Alberta, we overcontribute by $3 billion a year for the CPP, $1.5 billion a year for employment insurance. We send $27 billion east, for which we don't get anything back. The federal government collects taxes on our behalf and then uses those taxes as a carrot or a stick to make us do what they want. Do you remember hey, Alberta, we'll give you this money for building homes as long as you have a federal health pass and tell us about all your citizens' health information, right? We already have a national unity crisis. We have people saying Team Canada and waving flags, and 3 years ago, if you waved a flag, they called you a terrorist if you're from the West.
Yeah.
We have people saying Team Canada, oh, buy Tim Hortons, even though Tim Hortons is a half U.S. company. But they didn't scream Team Canada when Alberta was being thrown under the bus, either with the national energy policy in the early 80s, or more recently when the Prime Minister was talking about using Alberta exports as a bargaining stick with Donald Trump. Like there is no Team Canada. We're in the middle of a national unity crisis. Alberta produces an insane amount of energy. Quebec produces an insane amount of energy through hydroelectric dams. They also sit on one of the largest gas reserves in North America and could be completely an energy superpower if they would just, that fool that was on the video, if he would just get rid of his ideology and get back to reality and drill, baby, drill, that country would be filthy, stinking rich, and they wouldn't have anything to worry about. They wouldn't have to worry about not having propane and freezing like happened a couple years ago, So the whole idea that we might be in a national unity crisis, no. The national unity crisis may get worse, but we're already in one for sure.
So what could propel Alberta separation? I mean, as it is right now, you say maybe it's gaining some momentum and people are really starting to mumble a bit more about it, maybe in coffee shops across the province. But let's just say, because we've been looking at the polls lately, and I'm going to take ECOS completely out of the equation because ECOS is run by that guy he just hates Pierre Poilievre, hates the Conservatives. I forget his name, Frank something or other. But we'll throw the Main Street polling in there that shows suddenly the Liberal Party leading the Conservatives, at least in Ontario, and still far behind in the rest of the country, the Maritimes in the West and whatnot. But let's just say that when this election finally comes, and the Liberals somehow manage to pull off a minority government with Mark Carney, and I realize how far-fetched that sounds, but you never know what's going to happen. Could that be the linchpin that makes Alberta fight? Because Carney's plan is worse than Trudeau's ever was. I've been listening to this guy for the past couple of weeks, and he is downright dangerous. It's frightening. He's crazy. He wants to put on carbon tariffs permanent when he gets rid of the carbon tax. He was just talking about that yesterday or today. But let's just say he wins. Do the people of Alberta then go, we got to get out of here? Would that be a good impetus to really get some momentum going?
Of course, absolutely. And the problem with democracy, especially like a democracy like what Canada has, is if one group can fool the majority, they win. Have you ever heard the story? It's not an actual story. It wasn't Joseph Stalin that did this, but there's a story. The story goes, Joseph Stalin was speaking to a group of aristocrats and explaining how they wanted to move things forward. And one of them asked him, well, how is this going to work? The people, they're going to hate us. They're scared of us. We've been tyrannizing them for years. And Joseph Stalin grabbed a chicken and he pulls out a bunch of feathers and he's beating this thing up. He's choking the chicken and he throws it down on the floor and the chicken runs away from him. and he says, watch. He takes some grain out of his pocket and he throws it at his feet. Chicken comes right back and eats it again. That's not much different than voters. I mean, the Mark Carney and those ideological fools are talking about CERB 2.0, giving universal basic income, printing more money, further deflating our economy and destabilizing our country. And people, they ignore the consequence to that action, and they just see, oh, I'm going to get $2,000 a month. I'm going to vote for these guys. Oh, weed's going to be legal. Oh, I'm going to vote for this guy, right? This is the world we live in. So I don't think that the Liberal government is going to make any kind of government. I think they're going to be wiped right off the map, and I hope they lose their party status for what they've done to Canada. But stranger things have happened, and it wouldn't surprise me if they actually did gain some ground. But most of those things that you read telling you, oh, they're gaining ground, they're ahead in the polls, it's all bullshit. It's totally fake.
Suppression polls, obviously, but and the Ecos one, I absolutely understand. Frank Graves is the guy's name, and he's on record, on social media, even 10 years ago, talking about how much he hates conservatives, and he's in no position to be running a polling company. But when you're talking about Main Street and then maybe Leger and Angus Reid coming out showing liberals starting to creep up a little bit, and that could be the bounce, the same thing that Kamala Harris got in the States when they first announced her. I don't know. But I know that Pierre Poilievre has come off weak in the last week and a half or so. And I think yesterday he came out with the whole fentanyl border thing, which may have bucked him back up a little bit. But when he agreed with Trudeau about a dollar for dollar tariff retaliation, I think there's a lot of people in Canada going, oh, no, what are you doing, man? Like, are you insane?
I think he's trying really hard to look strong. And he's been doing a pretty good job. I think he's a good guy. I think he really wants things to be good for Canada. He wants things to be better for Canada. But he will not, absolutely will not do anything to fix the inequities between the West and Eastern Canada. He's already spoken out against an Alberta pension plan, even though we can show the numbers that it benefits Albertans tremendously if we manage and have our own pension plan. He has spoken out against fixing the equalization program, but Quebec doesn't include their resource revenue from hydroelectricity in their equalization formula, yet Alberta includes our oil and gas revenue. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. So Pierre Poilievre, I would bet $5 that he's going to be the next prime minister of the country. I think it's going to take a lot longer than people realize. And the best we can hope for is that he will be less bad for Alberta. And I say this with 45 years of experience. Well, I guess 35 probably paying attention. We had Western people become prime ministers and always talking about how we can fix the relationship with Alberta and Eastern Canada. Stephen Harper's a perfect example. He contributed to the firewall letters. He was the one that came up with the ideas how Alberta can insulate themselves from the federal government, be more prosperous. He became the prime minister, and not one of those things happened. It's just business. You cannot do anything to fix Confederation if you want to be prime minister, because the business case ends at the Manitoba border.
So do you think Danielle Smith would go along with this? I mean, I'm trying to picture the beginnings of this process, and I'm going back to the mid-'90s because really it's the only thing that I could think of in terms of a province separating from Canada. And, the big sovereignty crisis of the mid-1990s when Quebec had that vote, and it was like 50.1% in favor of staying in Canada. I mean, that was as close as it could get.
Close as it gets, yeah.
Would that be something that Alberta would have to initiate through political means? Or is it a petition? Because I know you guys have got a petition for a referendum on Alberta sovereignty up on the Alberta Prosperity Project website. Would that be something that you would take to Danielle and say, look, we've got like 500,000 signatures here. We need you to do something on this. Do you think it would be like moving a mountain to get her to do anything? And I'll be completely honest, she has been, as far as I'm concerned, even though there's a lot of people who say she's a globalist and she's all of this, I don't think she is.
Well, she's not.
I don't think she is, but she's done more than any other Canadian politician in terms of, adhering to freedom principles and common sense principles, right? Do you think the Sovereignty Act, would she be open to something like this? Could she take that petition to her cabinet, to her caucus, and say, all right, guys, this is something we seriously have to look at?
So there's a couple questions there. The first one was, would she be on board? And I think you meant, would she be on board with the idea of separation or independence or secession?
Right.
The other one was, would she be receptive to a petition?
Yeah. Well, no, could she actually convince? I mean, now we know what kind of a negotiator she is. She's been at Mar-a-Lago dealing with one of the best negotiators on the planet. So we know that she's probably good at convincing people of things. Could she get her cabinet and her caucus to buy into this? I mean,
Yes.
I understand this. This is a big deal, man.
Yes,
Is
she
it possible?
could, and she wouldn't have a choice. Our government here in Alberta is compelled by legislation to table referendums if we meet the criteria for a citizens' initiative referendum. That was one of the things the UCP did early on. They passed some legislation, and I call it a smoke and mirrors legislation because the criteria for achieving it is almost impossible. The way it works is Alberta citizens can sign a formal petition under Elections Alberta rules, asking the government to put a referendum question on the table. If it's a matter of constitutional issue like secession or equalization or something like that, you need about 600. You need a roughly 600,000 people, or 20%, to do that. If it's a regular, provincial jurisdiction, just legislation type thing issue, you need 10%. So Danielle Smith, if we got 600,000 signatures and plopped them on her desk saying we want a referendum question on secession, she would be compelled to do it through law, by law. Now, it doesn't say how long they have before they can do it, but they do have to do it. And I also want to point out, one thing I've learned about Danielle Smith over the last couple years, and full disclosure, when I first met her, I sat beside her and had dinner with her in Olds at the Red Willow Barn or something like that. I realized who I was sitting with, and I was like, I hate this woman. I hate her. She destroyed my life. She destroyed my livelihood. She crossed the floor, all these things. I've since learned she made a terrible mistake, and the lesson that she learned is now influencing the way she does things. I asked her once, we asked her once, why don't you just legislate an Alberta pension plan? It's within your jurisdiction. You can do it with an act of the legislature right now. You know it's the right thing to do. And her response was, I don't want to be Jason Kenney 2.0. I'm not a tyrant. I will put it to the people of Alberta. So that tells me if the people of Alberta specifically said they want something, she will do it because she believes in choice. The other part of that, specifically regarding secession, we hosted, when I say we, the Alberta Prosperity Project, hosted a leadership debate in Edmonton. And we invited all of the UCP leadership candidates to debate some stuff. Basically, we wanted to show our membership which person was more aligned with what APP wanted to do. Okay. Ezra Levant was questioning her with Dennis Modry, and Ezra asked her, I understand you want to do these things with the Alberta Sovereignty, with the United Canada Act. What if it doesn't work? How far are you willing to go? What is your or else, and would you use it? And her response was, the Alberta Prosperity Project is the or else. She said, if she can't get it done, if she can't fix the wrongs that are, with our relationship with Canada, it becomes the citizens' duty to mobilize and get it done. We are the or else. She'll fulfill the leadership role and do what the province wants her to do, but we have to do the work. And unfortunately, she's done the same thing with the Alberta pension plan. I wish she'd just legislated it. We're trying to work on that too. But so the short answer is yes, she is receptive and she would do something about it.
Is there going to be an Alberta police force also, like Ontario and Quebec have?
We're already working on it, just in a little bit of a different way. So what she's done is she's given our Alberta sheriffs more responsibility and more power than they had previously had. So we had this issue where our sheriffs, they're doing most of the jobs that RCMP did anyway, but there was just a couple silly things they couldn't do. So we said, well, why don't we just utilize them to the best of our advantage? They're our police, they're provincial police, and that lays the foundation, lays the groundwork for an Alberta police force. So she's not necessarily saying we're going to have an Alberta police force, but we're laying the foundation so that the RCMP become irrelevant.
You see, it sounds to me like the infrastructure is already being laid out, the Sovereignty Act, right? And so, I'm not sure if that's Danielle Smith behind that, or if it's you guys behind that, or whoever it is, but somebody is behind already getting ready for sovereignty. That's what it seems like. What kind of an impact does the Alberta Prosperity Project have within the province? Do you guys have a large following? Do you have a large database? Are there more and more people joining?
It's not that large, but it's growing. And it's one of those things you mentioned before, kind of the independence movement kind of comes and goes. And the Alberta Prosperity Project has identified that. There's times when there's a lot of energy and a lot of desire for an independent Alberta. And then there's times where there just isn't. We just went through that. Danielle Smith was elected. We had the Alberta Sovereignty within the United Canada Act. She's doing all these things. And a lot of people said, yay, we won. And the rest of us within the APP were like, well, hold on. Nothing has actually changed. We haven't fixed anything. We still need this referendum. And then people are like, yay, it's all great. Just kind of walking away. And that's the reality of the situation. So if you ask me, how many Albertans are on board with Alberta sovereignty? I'd say it's a very, very large group. We just have to reach them.
Why did she fire for a second time now the entire board of the Alberta Health Services? Were they corrupt as well?
It was the right thing to do. I mean, if you have a board that's not doing what they're supposed to be doing, why would you keep them? Alberta Health Services sucks. The organization sucks. It's one of the worst run organizations in the country. The people are absolutely fantastic. The doctors, the nurses, the frontline workers, the lab techs, all of them, amazing people, bend over backwards to give good quality of service, but they're stuck within this behemoth of an organization that really could care less, So Danielle Smith is looking at this. She's the CEO of Alberta. She's a CEO of a $49 billion corporation. And she's looking at these things that aren't effectively, they're not using our resources effectively, in this case, tax dollars, and people need to be fired. And that's all there is to it.
Is the left starting to show a resurgence in Alberta? And I always worry about that. When I see people like us, common sense folks who happen to have a sense of freedom start to squabble a little bit amongst ourselves, and you see that left-wing behemoth starting to come up, and I've seen Heed Nenshi posting on X all the time. Now, he gets ratioed every single day, and I wonder if he even notices what the comments are like. But is there a possibility that if Danielle slips up someplace along the way, that these guys could somehow manage to grab power again in that province?
No. The only thing that would give the NDP the ability to govern this province again is if our current government, or the UCP party at large, did something so heinous and horrendous that even the people that kind of plugged their nose and voted for their UCP candidate last time couldn't do. The NDP they have a real leg up in that they have the support of most of the unions. And if you do a little digging in that, it's an interesting dig. You'll find that the NDP rewards union bosses very, very well for towing the line. There's a number of them that sit on the provincial board of the New Democratic Party in Alberta. And in return for that, for their position in power, they have to steer their unions towards the Labour Party. Like the NDP is the Labour Party, right? Well, how well did the NDP do for Labour when they were governing? We had $150,000 jobs lost, economy in shambles. It was just an absolute disaster. So even Naheed Nenshi with his great slogans like "These people don't need to eat," I don't think he's going to bring them to governance.
So is Danielle still clearing out the rot in the bureaucracy? Is that what that second firing of AHS board was? And possibly in the legal areas as well, the bureaucracy, the deep state runs very deep. And it could be that she's still trying to clean that stuff out. Because, what I've been finding out a lot lately, Chris, especially in the last 6 months, I'll say, is that the bureaucracy controls everything. And if they don't like what a politician promises, they've got very creative ways to not implement, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's doing what she can. People have to remember, it's not just a government that we elect that runs the province. Who do you think is there election to election? There's people behind those elected officials, deputy ministers, a whole slew of bureaucrats under their command or whatever. So somebody once said to me, actually it was Dr. Gary Davidson. I asked him that very question. I said, why?
I got to get him on. I got to get him on.
Oh, he is a fantastic human being like that. He is such a amazing guy. I hope
he's the guy behind the COVID report, by the way, that one that came out a couple of weeks ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest encouragements to me throughout this entire thing, I met him very early on in my civil disobedience. I've stayed in touch with him ever since. And yeah, so much respect for him. But he said to me once, you have to understand that it isn't just, when you say take down AHS, okay, great. What is that? Well, that's 2,000 bureaucrats that do not agree with conservative values. That's 2,000 bureaucrats that have done very well for themselves under the current corrupt system. And they will do anything in their power to hold on to that. So Danielle Smith, like every other politician, I think, thinks you're going to go in and do all these things. And you get in there and you look around, you're like, holy crap, everybody wants me dead. Like, they all want to kill me. They all want me
It's like Survivor.
gone.
It's like going onto the island, right? They're all looking at you. Okay, who's with me and who's
Exactly.
not? Wow, that's crazy.
Exactly. And she doesn't have the power that Trump has. Trump can sign executive orders all day long as he can get it past the Senate and Congress. I mean, he can do pretty much whatever he wants. And that's the way that country works. We don't have that luxury here at all. It's a horrible, ingrained, entrenched bureaucracy. And we allowed it to get this way over 50 years. If people think it's going to be fixed in a year or two, they're delusional.
It was interesting during the Coots thing, the first one and the second one, people were screaming and yelling. And I don't think they quite understand the system that Danielle needs to do something. She needs to let these guys off. And that's not something that politicians are supposed to be able to do in our system. Now, we know Trudeau did it because he doesn't care about any of the rules, laws, or conventions of our government system. But Danielle, I mean, I think there was some kind of an email that may have been in her office a couple of years ago regarding Coots, and the left-wing corporate media got all over it and said, she's trying to affect the court case. I mean, seriously, she couldn't do anything. Even if she wanted to get those guys, she couldn't do it. And people were blaming her,
Well, they got to blame someone. And the only other option is to blame ourselves. Whose fault is it really that we're in this situation? It's not the politician's fault. It's not a bureaucrat's fault. It's our fault. Canadians are the most politically apathetic people on the planet. Less than 3% of Canadians have a membership in a political party. We don't celebrate politics. We don't particularly care to talk about it. We certainly don't have revivalist rallies like they do in the United States. We don't celebrate political events the same way they do. This is our fault. We've been, and I'm talking about me mostly here because I'm 45 years old, or am I 46? I think I turned 46 this year. And for the first 40 years of my life, of course, 18 of those I couldn't vote, I didn't know anything about politics. I thought democracy was voting. I had no idea about civics, certainly no idea how politics works. And I was completely happy to just let other people make decisions for me. And then I get a little older, get in the workforce. I start a career in the oil patch, and I realize, holy crap, like people are making really bad decisions. And I just sat there and whined about it on Facebook, not knowing what else to do. So that's our fault. That's not the politician's fault. We, as a democracy, it's only as good as the people who are voting. And we've been very bad at it for years.
You know, I think it would be worth our while to maybe start talking to some people who are very well versed in Canadian civics and start some kind of a show or, you know, an 8-part series that's fun and engaging and that people could watch and learn things and have a good time doing it instead of just voting for orange, blue, or red or purple or
Here's
green.
a suggestion.
All right.
Do you know what this is?
It's a book, man. I want to read a book.
Nobody wants to read a book. This book was written by my friend Eva Chipyuk.
Yes.
Eva, that's what her thing is. She's realized that people are civically ignorant. And that book is her attempt to help educate people as to how we take back control of democracy. In Alberta, we had a very exciting group that did that during the Kenny. It started with the Jason Kenney era, and that was Take Back Alberta. Now, love him or hate him, David Parker did a fantastic job in teaching people about civics and how to take over things and become involved and make a difference, right? So it doesn't have to be dry and boring and textbook. It can be like, hey, we're meeting under cover of darkness in this barn because it's illegal to meet for political purposes right now, and decide how we're going to change the world.
Is there still a lot of division and squabbling amongst people in Alberta?
Yes, of course there is. I see in the comments, I don't know where this came from, but people are saying that I have different Facebook profiles. I've never used a different Facebook profile. I'm very open about the things that I talk about. It's always my face and my writing. But people, they make all sorts of claims. I did a satirical video about chemtrails because I watched people making threats about pilots and saying they need to hang for making lines in the sky and all these things. Reconnect Canada is Eva's book.
There it is.
And people, they gave me death threats. They said I wasn't never about a freedom. Oh, all of a sudden now I'm a grifter and I orchestrated this whole thing. And I'm like, dude, I'm a freaking roughneck. Like I'm not that smart that I could mastermind an entire thing starting with a bat or a lab leak in Wuhan, China, right? There's a lot of bickering. I have friends of mine who recently became Christians. They were saved by the grace of God through the blood of Jesus Christ. And now, because they're a new Christian, I'm not Christian enough, and I'm a Judas because I voted for Danielle Smith. Pardon me? Like, this is where we're at, you know? I share my thoughts, my opinions. I say some things right. I say some things wrong. People disagree with it, or they agree with it. But if I don't agree with a specific thing, it means that everything else, I must be a lizard person sent to infiltrate by George Soros, right?
Are you still doing your podcast on a regular basis, or is it just whenever you feel like it?
I'm trying to do it more regularly. It's very, very difficult. But the minute I heard the words spoken out loud by the most powerful man in the world, Governor Trudeau, Canada, the 51st state, I was like, I got to do my part. I've tried to bring guests on to talk about these things as much as I can. But like today, you know, I'm in the middle of doing stuff, and instead of working on a podcast, I'm thawing out sewer lines in my campground because I have a business.
Yeah.
Right?
You got to run the business, man. And what's the special tomorrow morning?
I don't know. I won't know until I go in for breakfast and decide.
Oh, I thought you did that the night before. Guess not.
No, I was at one point, but I kind of stopped. What I do is I go in and I look what we have, what's been selling, what's not been selling, what do we need to use, and is it warm, is it cold, that kind of thing, and then I just pick something.
Don't forget to buy Canadian, my friend.
You know what? We're buying Mexican right now, folks. If you're enjoying fruits and vegetables and fresh stuff right now, you're buying Mexican or California. You're not buying Canadian. You could, though, if we got over this whole hydrocarbons are evil thing and built greenhouses in Alberta with our insane amount of natural gas that we could grow food in all year round. They do it in other parts of the world. We could do it here. We could be buying Canadian, but people instead would rather pursue an ideological fairy tale than prepare to buy Canadian.
All right, brother. Thanks for coming on tonight. Good to see you again, and I'll excuse me, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. There's Chris Scott from the Whistlestop Cafe, Mirror, Alberta. And you can find him, Whistlestop Cafe Facebook page. And the Alberta Prosperity Project. There's a video that Chris did that is on that page explaining why he became a member of the Alberta Prosperity Project. I find the whole idea extremely exciting. As I've been saying for the past, I don't know, forever, the lines on the map always get redrawn. Newfoundland became a part of Canada in 1949. If you look at the history of this country going back to 1867, and this, Chris brought up some great examples of other countries in our discussion earlier, but just look at Canada for a second. From 1867, the way Upper and Lower Canada looked, the way Ontario and Quebec looked, and the two other provinces that were part of Confederation, Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia or New Brunswick. And then Manitoba gets added to the mix in 1870. They used to call it the postage stamp province. You know what Manitoba looks like now, right? I mean, you can imagine what all the provinces look like now just from closing your eyes and going, all right, that's what Canada looks like. Manitoba was called the postage stamp province because it was this little square piece of land. And then it expanded to what now is the southern part of Manitoba. And then eventually it grew that northern part as well. It's interesting, isn't it? How the lines on the map continue to change. It's been talked about for several years in Manitoba and northwestern Ontario that northwestern Ontario from Thunder Bay west to the Manitoba border should all just be part of Manitoba. Because Toronto, the capital of Ontario, doesn't care about Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay would be closer to Winnipeg anyway. So let's just go ahead and add them. They're part of Manitoba now. Why not? It makes more sense geographically. It hasn't happened, but it gets talked about. It gets joked about, and then it gets talked about again. Okay, guys, I've got a couple of breakers here for you, and this is really interesting. When we talked about the USAID controversy that has been unwinding for the past couple of days in the United States, in Canada, look what happened here. Canada Proud broke this, and so I've investigated it myself, and then there's a huge breaking story from TNC.news in just a second. I'll give it to you. Global Affairs Canada, which is the Canadian equivalent of USAID, has suddenly wiped their entire public database of foreign aid spending, and the data is no longer available to the public. Do they care that the public can't see it? Probably not, because it's been up there ever since today. They don't want Trump and his people to see it, because if Trump and his people see that they've been giving $25,000 for gay beauty pageants in Kosovo, or $50,000 or $75,000 for DEI in Iraq, he might not like it too much. And so let's have a look at the website here very quickly. First of all, when you hit the link, it takes forever, like the spinning wheel of death. It takes forever to come up on the page. Forever. When it finally does, we're working to restore access along with all data as soon as possible. It's been like this for hours. And I bet you if I hit refresh, it's going to take a while to come up. People keep going to it. Look at that. Isn't that something? All right, so I'm going to take that down for now. We're going to go to this story here. From TNC.news. Global Affairs Canada, a top funder of state-funded British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, mostly for foreign DEI projects. That's what we're spending our money on. Global Affairs Canada is listed as a major contributor to the charity wing of the UK's BBC in 23-24, money that was primarily used for DEI initiatives in Africa. That's where our money is going. Well, some of it. I'm sure some of it is going right into the pockets of NGO executives and government bureaucrats and even government elected officials themselves. According to the charity wing, BBC Media Action, GAC handed out $1,623,711 in taxpayer money to the BBC's charity group. Though BBC Media Action noted that Government Affairs Canada provided more than $1.6 million in funding for the fiscal year 23-24, only one BBC Media Action project was shown on GAC's website during that year, and it cost just over $1.5 million. GAC records show most of that money was allocated to a gender equality initiative in East Africa called Broadcasting for Change, empowering young women through media in Tanzania. The feds originally budgeted $2.12 million for the program that year, but only transferred $1.536 million. The website says the program funded a nationally recognized youth radio show called Niambi, that was focused on transforming young women and men's attitudes towards gender equality. According to the feds, the project was expected to strengthen the production of gender-sensitive and gender-transformative media that supports the social, economic, and political rights of young women and girls. It also aimed to increase supportive attitudes by Tanzanian youth towards young women's participation in society and to increase the use of social services that support the social, economic, and political rights of young women and girls. When asked about the other amount, nearly $100,000 in unaccounted for apparent spending, GAC asked True North for an indefinite extension to the deadline provided to give a response. Program was set to run from 2019 through 2024, right through the pandemic, and was granted a maximum contribution of $9.18 million, according to the federal report on the program and its spending. The government also planned a $1.165 million disbursement to BBC Media Action for the program for the fiscal year of 24-25, this fiscal year. This government is doing a terrible job paying bureaucrats in the media here. It's hard to believe the government's paying bureaucrats and media organizations in other countries will work any better. That's from Franco Terrazzano, who is the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Okay, so we're going to see if there's any more on that story in the next couple of days. Hopefully they keep digging, because that's kind of a mini bomb as compared to what happened in the United States with USAID. That is still leaking out. And some of the money that they've spent, into the trillions they're talking about now, on ridiculous stuff, you know, like gender theory, queer gender theory, critical race theory, all that stuff in different countries across the world, that's coming out. And that's why that program is going to be halted. It's halted now as it is for 3 months. And when they get in there and see everything else, I think there's a court order to stop them from looking right now. But when they get back at it and they see everything else that's going to be coming out, whoo, it's going to get ugly. It's going to get real ugly down there. Okay, so this is Justin Trudeau's tweet from a couple of days ago, just after the tariffs were temporarily suspended for 30 days. And here's what Trudeau said after the second phone call he had with Trump on Monday. Just had a good call with President Trump. Canada's implementing our $1.3 billion border plan. He neglects to mention here that's over 6 years. It's over 6 years. Reinforcing the border with new choppers, technology, and personnel, enhanced coordination with our American partners, and increased resources to stop the flow of fentanyl. Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are and will be working on protecting the border. Okay, so he hasn't explained that yet either. I doubt he will. In addition, Canada is making new commitments to appoint this fentanyl czar, which we will list cartels as terrorists, ensure 24/7 eyes on the border, launch a Canada-U.S. joint strike force to combat organized crime, fentanyl, money laundering. By the way, that's what they're using Canada for. It's a great big money laundering operation. All of these drug gangs operating in this country right now, all 4,000 of them, and yet somehow they can't get FinTrack to freeze those accounts, but they could get FinTrack to freeze the accounts of peace-loving, freedom-loving Canadians who went to protest their government's actions. Isn't that interesting? All right, so we read this thing for you. Now, here's our public safety minister just today, who appears to be walking back Trudeau's words. Watch.
Why should the longest undefended border in the world, which we pride ourselves in having, 400,000 people a day cross the border back and forth, billions of dollars of trade back and forth, jobs at stake? I don't understand why somebody can sort of willy-nilly throw out a suggestion that the entire Canadian border should be militarized. I don't think that's predicated on fact or evidence. We have incredibly strong teams, a strong border which is getting stronger. The RCMP, the CBSA, conservation officers, Indigenous police, provincial police forces, municipal police forces are cooperating. This is an important moment because we have jobs at stake. And so I think Mr. Poilievre has some explaining to do.
Mr. Poilievre has some explaining to do. What did he do? Mr. Poilievre at present doesn't have the power to do anything. What he talked about yesterday made perfect sense to me. He talked about locking up these fentanyl dealers for life. Life. Trudeau's the one that made the promise because Trump forced him to, and now it looks like David McGuinty, who is the minister of, what is he the minister of? Public safety? He says, well, I don't think we need the border to be militarized. Okay, hold on just a second. You got two bosses right now, Mr. McGuinty. I understand that. On one hand, you've got Justin Trudeau, who's made this promise to President Trump to enforce the border now. But maybe you've got Mark Carney saying, you know what, maybe we should walk that back because we don't really want to do that. So who's he supposed to listen to? The guy on the way out or the guy on the way in? But I hope Trump sees that. I really, really hope that Trump sees that. Here's a piece of video from committee a couple of months ago. Dane Lloyd, who is an Alberta MP, asking CSIS and RCMP the question of how many people are involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada and how many organizations are there. You're going to be blown away. Watch this.
How many, to the RCMP, how many people do you estimate are involved in the production and distribution of fentanyl in Canada? Do you have like a ballpark estimate? Is it 1,000 people? Is it 10,000 people?
I don't have a ballpark figure on it.
So you have no idea how many people could possibly be involved in the fentanyl trade in Canada?
There's a significant group, a significant number of organized crime group, but if you're asking me for a specific number, I can't give you a specific number.
How many organized crime groups are involved?
Over 4,000 organized crime groups in Canada, as assessed by the Criminal Intelligence Service Canada.
4,000 individual organized crime groups, all with their own distinct leadership and membership?
That's correct.
4,000 organized crime groups, all with their own distinct leadership, operating in Canada right now. Fentanyl and other hard drugs. How did this ever happen? 4,000. If each gang had, let's say, 20 members, and that's being conservative, 20 members, that's 80,000. 80,000 gang members. Wow. We've got a huge problem in this country, man. Seriously. You go to the core, the downtown core of the city that you live in, and look at it. And tell me that it's the same as it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Never mind 20 years ago. This is some good news here. Google axing diversity hiring targets as it reviews its DEI programs. Google. Oh, this is the last holdout. This is the one I was complaining about last night. These guys also run YouTube. Google has become the latest in a growing number of U.S. firms to row back on DEI initiatives as it axes hiring targets and reviews its programs. The tech giant has followed firms like Amazon, Meta, and McDonald's as corporate America continues to shift towards more conservative social and political stances in response to the start of Trump's presidency. That's awesome. In its annual report released this week, Google's parent company, Alphabet, omitted a sentence that had been included in its previous few reports, stating that it was committed to making diversity, equity, and inclusion part of everything we do and to growing a workforce that's representative of the users we serve. Meanwhile, a company email sent to staff said the firm would no longer have the aspirational goals that it previously set to improve representation, the Wall Street Journal first reported. And a Google spokesperson says, we're committed to creating a workplace where all our employees can succeed and have equal opportunities. And over the last year, we've been reviewing our programs designed to help us get there. Over the last year. You mean over the last week, don't you? We've updated our 10K language to reflect this, and as a federal contractor, our teams are also evaluating changes required following recent court decisions and executive orders on this topic. All right, so maybe they got forced into it, but they are still doing it. So hip, hip, hooray. Regarding that Team Canada thing that Chris and I were talking about, those sheep who've been going, Team Canada, man, we're going to take on the U.S. and we're going to win. Like boobs. If you want to see a ridiculous movie about this very thing that's been going on, watch Canadian Bacon with John Candy and Dan Aykroyd, I think, is in it. So I got to take Chris's name down from here. It's been up there for a while. I guess I should just take it down and leave mine up. How about that? Okay, so at hockey games, NHL hockey games in the past week, Vancouver, Ottawa, Edmonton, the people there, the crowds have been booing the U.S. national anthem. So there's a new policy now that's been issued following these incidents. And it's because of a Pee-wee tournament that's starting next week in Quebec City. City officials are reminding the public, don't boo the 11 and 12-year-old American hockey players who are coming to town for the event. That's according to the Canadian press. Mayor Bruno Marchand told a news conference he understands the desire to send a message to the United States, but that ordinary American visitors don't represent their president. Oh, stupid. Oh, okay, one more thing before I go here. And by the way, guys, tonight, and again, once again, I'm leaving the extension up on Telegram tonight in the Shadow at Night community. That's a group there. I think there's 500 members in there now. We're going to leave the extension up in there. It's also available, obviously, on the website, shadowdavids.com. Next week, we won't be. There is no show tomorrow night. I'm busy all day tomorrow. I will not have time to put a show together tomorrow night, back Monday night. But yeah, tonight on the extension, we've got a former cop, also a former 33rd degree Freemason, who's going to expose everything. Now, this is an older video that I saw probably 7 or 8 years ago and went, whoa, that's crazy. We're going to watch it again tonight. And you know what? You can't even find this guy's name. Don't even know if he's still alive. Haven't seen him on anything else. So this story comes from IFL Science, and it's not good. Avian flu first made the jump from birds into dairy cows on farms in a number of U.S. states in the spring of last year. Let me make this bigger. Why is it so small? There we go. All right. Until now, all such cases of the H5N1 virus have been ascribed to a genotype called B3.13, but the U.S. Department of Agriculture has just announced the detection of a second genotype. It's in milk samples. This is the first. What do you think they're doing here? This is the first detection of this virus genotype in dairy cattle, confirmed the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service in a statement. By the way, if you think Canada is the only place they've been culling birds and cattle, you would be wrong. It's been happening in the United States insanely more than here. And it's been going on longer as well. This detection was confirmed on January 31st in milk samples collected in Nevada as part of the USDA's National Milk Testing Strategy. It's part of the agency's surveillance measures as it tracks the ongoing H5N1 situation on farms all across the country. They are reducing the food supply, my friends. And maybe they're trying to get another pandemic going. Here's a reminder.
Of reducing population growth. That's this big benefit. The key thing you can do to reduce population growth is actually improve health.
In the developed countries, the big winners are countries that have shrinking populations. I would like to reduce the number of people on the planet because there's too many of us.
When we invest in clean energy and electric vehicles and reduce population,
Wait. What the?
More of our children can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that.
We're taking things that are, genetically modified organisms, and we're injecting them in little kids' arms. We just shoot them right into the vein.
What the?
So in the next 5 to 10 years, for the next pandemic, we'll solve all those problems.
You say the next pandemic. There will be another pandemic.
Absolutely. We don't know when.
History teaches us that the next pandemic is a matter of when, not if.
We know what's next. We're going to have another major coronavirus pandemic before the end of this decade, before 2030.
If we really want to prevent the next pandemic, and there will be one, there will absolutely be an outbreak of another pandemic. It may be next year.
We need more money to plan for the second pandemic. There's going to be another pandemic. We have to think ahead.
We definitively will have to face other surprises, black swans, as they are called, maybe different kinds of viruses.
But also there will be a surprise outbreak.
Most of the work we're going to do to be ready for pandemic 2, I call this pandemic 1. We just need to mess around.
All right, that's it for the social media part of the show tonight, you guys. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you all coming to the show. You guys, regular viewers of Chris and Carrie over on the Whistlestop Cafe Facebook page and X page, thank you. Go ahead and like and share this page. It's called The Shadoe Davis Show on Facebook or on Rumble or on YouTube. You can find me on all of the big social media platforms. Thank you for being here, and thank you for sticking with me for the duration. The extension begins in 2 minutes on ShadoeDavis.com and the Shadoe at Night community on Telegram. I'll see you there. If not, I'll catch you next Monday night, 8 o'clock Central, for another Shadoe at Night live stream. Love you all. Appreciate you all. Bye for now.